I'm Craig Constantine. Welcome to the Movers Mindset Podcast, where I talk with movement enthusiasts to learn who they are, what they do, and why they do it. My guest today is Julie Angel and her dog. I love dogs. Welcome, Julie. How are you today?
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm very well. I'm very good. Thank you.
Sometimes I don't have I love recording in person because then sometimes I actually have a cup of coffee, which I can say, this podcast is powered by coffee and dogs, if there's a dog under the table. But so I can see the dog, but I can't touch the dog. So many things. You are, I guess it would depend. I was going to say you're most well known for, but then I guess it would really depend on who is listening and where, like what epochs they know you from. And I'm always curious when I talk to people who are passionate about movement. I'm always curious to know, it feels to me, because this is what happens to me. I really get excited about some movement related project, and then I have a better idea. And I have to really work hard to convince myself to just let go of the old thing. And I'm wondering, do you go through those same sort of transitions when you're moving into, I know you've been working a lot more with breath work, and we should talk about your podcast too, but as you're moving into these new things, how do you talk yourself out of the old thing?
No.
And we're done.
Everything is happening all at the same time. It's everything everywhere all at once.
Good movie.
And it was a phenomenal movie. And no, there's no division. There is absolute blur and crossover, and everything is the same as everything else. Because there's just these common threads that just go through all of my work. So nothing feels different. So whether I'm making films, whether I'm training parkour, training someone else in movement, whether I'm doing breath work, whether I'm walking my dog, whether I'm daydreaming, it's all the same, because it's all about explorations, transformations, curiosity, fun, and just I guess there's a creative thread that is the most obvious one. I mean, I would have never had an interest in parkour as a practice or a culture or documenting it if it didn't have a creative element to it. And then I wouldn't have been interested in breathwork if it didn't have this transformational aspect of it. And the other thing is that I'm really lazy. I'm a high performance slacker. And so it has to be like simple and minimalist in doing it. If there's any practice where it's like, well, you need to buy all of this equipment and you need to do all of these things and you need a membership, or you can own, like, I'm just like, no, that'll be a no. Like, all of those things cause friction points for me, and I don't do them. So there's a minimalism, a simplicity, a creativity, and an adaptability, which is why to other people it may seem very different that I wear all these hats, which I'm equally multi-passionate about. But for me, I'm like, same. It's all the same. Same.
So I'm guessing you would not identify as a completist. So I'm the crazy person who tries to like, oh, I like this show. I want to listen to all the episodes, or at least I'm going to skip through them. Or what happens to me is I figure out, oh, I should fix the intro on this thing. And then I want to go and back edit 100 things. And I guess I don't really know how to let go of stuff yet. So how do I learn to do that? How do I learn to just ship it, hit the button and like, yeah, over the transom?
Progress, not perfection. And I'm really big on like the 1 to 5 or 10% rates of progress. I'm just like, because I know there's a constant evolution. There's no stop. There's no like, okay, well, if I do this and I go all in this thing, then I reach a certain destination. And like there is none. I'm all in the journey. I'm all like daydreaming out the window going, oh, that's interesting. Like, that's cool. Like, that's stimulating for me right now, intellectually, creatively, physically. And all the other things that I'm like, nah. And also I have a really easy time saying no.
That's a superpower.
That's a superpower. And the other thing is like, I can press the fuck it button really easily. So, people may say, oh, do you want to do this or that? And I'm like, nope. No,
Let me think about that. No.
that'll be a no. Like no interest. No interest. I know myself really well, and I'm very happy to say I don't know. I'm very happy to say, do you know what? I used to think that, and wow, was I off the mark? I was completely misguided in my thinking. But I'm really happy to go and be curious and be wrong about everything. And if I do some things that work, I do more of that. And then when I find things that like, well, that was a disaster, then it's like, okay, that's an equally valued insight. Um, but yeah, I'm I used to think I would want to be a perfectionist, then I would be better at things. And I have a lot of friends, particularly in the creative industries, who are perfectionists, and it's torture. It's
Yes, it's
really
torture and it's
it's not a
hiding.
gift.
I
Yeah.
I I can really hide. No, this has to be just right before I do. And I got to fix all the things, and I get this giant list. And no, it's crazy.
I'm like,
Um,
"Nah,
I-
have fun with it. It's fine."
my, my personal brand of crazy is trying to get everything just right. Um,
I'm a
and
messy imperfectionist. I'm high
yeah,
performance
I
slacker,
feel like I should
messy
get paint on the floor
imperfectionist.
more than I do. Like that kind of like, yeah, I
Oh, yeah,
mean,
let
I'm
it
painting,
go.
but get paint on the floor. Yeah,
Good
as
meals
you,
come from very messy kitchens in my life.
mm, yeah, clean up afterwards. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
it's a different project.
Mm. I recently, I don't know, I should probably qualify that with like a years, 10 years. In the last 10 years, I've noticed my urge to have opinions about everything kind of evaporated. And sometimes I get pushback about like people hear an episode and they're like, well, why didn't you challenge them more about this topic? Or why didn't you, like I should be like a dog with a bone or something. And my answer is usually, well, because I was just super interested in what they had to say. Like somewhere I don't know how I lost that along the way. And I think that also helps me not be so much of a perfectionist, because then like if I'm super concerned about my opinion and making sure everybody understands me the way I want to be understood, then I'm gonna try and like, oh, I have to everything has to be just the way I want it. Otherwise somebody's gonna misconstrue my opinion. So
I
I found it
think
very
that's an
freeing.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point is that I don't I don't carry the responsibility of what anyone else thinks.
Hmm.
And so part of like pressing the fuck it button is also like, well, you like I'm not the thought police. And
Right.
equally, I will not have someone try and thought police me either. And there's a lot of that going around these days. There's a lot of
Yes.
that. And as a creative, I find that very upsetting. I feel that creative endeavors are about risk and communication and expression. And the same can be said for how we approach our movement, how we move through the world.
Mm.
Like, how do you move through the world physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, creatively? And, um, you know, in the parkour world, like, lots of people hold on to, find a way. But it's like, well, that's allowed when you move in this certain way in this environment and these things. But God damn you if you try and apply that outside of this arena and context, it's like, no,
Yeah.
shut up. Like, you don't get to decide what I think and how long my journey is to process that, and I have no responsibility over what someone else thinks, and when you can really feel comfortable in your own skin with that, it's very liberating.
Mm. When you mentioned the proverbial thought police, I was thinking sometimes I get like why this guest versus that guest. Not Julie specifically, but like sometimes people go, "Oh, you should have so and so on the show," or "Why did you have that person on the show?" And I turn into the Gene Wilder meme, like, "Oh, tell me more," like tell me more about how I should do the thing your way.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I try not to do that because it's like I'm doing it, like it's not like a
yeah,
total dick meme.
yeah.
But people have no effing clue how much effort it takes just forget making the show, but just to get people scheduled, like, it's just crazy. Um, and I just get excited that any of them ever get shipped. Like I'm just so excited that any of it ever works. And I'm like, well, stop raining on my parade. Stop telling me I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Max Henry. I love to shout this one out. Max Henry, like way back, think it was like episode 4 in 2017. Sitting at his house, and we had one of these great conversations. We're like, dude, we should press record at some point. So we're recording, and he went on like a mini rant about grassroots clothing companies, videos, all these things in parkour space. He's like, what we want is not like the best. We want like 732 clothing brands. We want all the people who are passionate about the thing to have moved into their little corner of the thing. So when the big kids come along, as they eventually will, to try and monetize it, the people that really care about it have a bunch of choices. They don't have to be like, all I can do is pick, Coke or Pepsi. It'd be like, no, there's a million things out here you can choose from in each of those spaces: video, audio, books, writing. I forgot. I don't know. Is there a question in there?
I don't know. I'm just listening. I don't know where it's going. It's good. It's all good.
Yeah. Let's turn signal. Let's talk about breath work. So it feels to me, but clearly I'm wrong based on what you've said so far. It feels to me like breath work is a new thing. So clearly I'm wrong. Did it click with people that you felt that was the best thing to be trying to teach people? Like, see what I'm getting at? Like, I feel like
saying
maps.
Why breath work?
Yeah. Like, why are you, I know why I do breath work for myself, but I don't teach it. Like, what made you feel like, I should lean into this now?
I mean, it's my interest was triggered from doing the MoveNat aquatics courses taught by Vic Verdier. And so that's like 15 years ago.
I was going to say, and didn't you do like the colds? I would say the cold stuff too, but there's also
I've done some Wim Hof stuff.
Yeah.
I've played around with that. So when so Vic is he previously had like world records as a deep cave diver, wreck diver, and so there's you get to really know a lot about how you breathe and your respiratory chemistry when you're down under for like 23 hours. And for me, like that's an idea of insanity. And I'm claustrophobic as well. So it's like worst day ever. But when he was teaching the breath work, number one, as soon as anyone started to talk about breathing, I would start yawning to a point where it was like embarrassing. I had to go and like stand behind people. It was comedic. And then we did a test where I remember my first breath hold, and this is not in the water. This is just standing on the ground, in air.
Standing around like a normal person.
Yeah, being a normal person. And I only had like 21 seconds, and it was completely mental. It was a mental game because I felt claustrophobic. And then within 3 days, I had 3.5 minutes. So that makes you go, something's going on here.
Head. Yeah.
That was really in my head. And also, I'm a water baby. I love the water. That's my favorite training environment all day, every day. Just put me in the water. So when you're doing like breath hold water drills, I love it. I really, really love it. And we have this thing called the dive reflex, and where basically once you put your head in water, your face in water, various different physiological things happen, and they're basically like all good things. Anyone who's even next to a large body of water for a prolonged period of time, your blood pressure will drop. And then there's the whole aquatic ape. Are we or aren't we? Was that part of our evolutionary story or not? So anyway, the breath holding was a really interesting insight into how we move, both in the water, that has very obvious repercussions, but then exploring, well, how do you breathe when you're just moving? And so no one had really, I'd been to a few yoga classes, and yoga's not my thing. I don't like the air. I don't like the mats lined up. I don't like hearing everyone else's like weird breath. Like it's just not for me. It's just nothing. Yeah, it's all. It's just not for me. It's not. It's huge value in it. Personally, it's not my cup of tea. And so having been introduced to breathwork in the way that Vic did was also correlating to basically like how do you grapple and fight on the floor if you can't breathe? So it then became these two really interesting insights of safety, movement, self-defense, and fun time in the water with all these practical things. And then basically these insights into, well, your body prioritizes its breathing over everything else. Like in terms of our physiological needs, it's top of the food chain. It's at the apex. And then, so that was my in point. That was my inroad. And then just through friends of mine who would then, I had friends, who were exploring the Wim Hof method. And so I went to go and do some Wim Hof stuff and love an ice bath, love cold water immersion, self-induced hyperventilation. Go fuck yourself. Not doing it. Don't like it. Just like, you told me I could swear. So that was probably the worst thing you could say to me. And basically, especially if you're someone who's, and at the time I was in perimenopause, which is the hormonal phase where you stop your regular menstrual cycle and it's before, but you're still menstruating, but your hormones are on this really wild roller coaster. It can literally be like one day you wake up and you're like, life's amazing. And the next day nothing's changed. And you're like, I need to cry and my joints are stiff and everything. Like, what has happened? And it's just your biochemistry. There's nothing like out of sorts, but you're just the product of your hormones. And at the time, my dad was very ill. He had a frontal lobe dementia, and it was a very difficult, challenging time for the family. And so we started the breathing, and one of the instructors, Chris, is like, he's a very extreme character. And it was a really insightful experience. But we did like 15 minutes of these rounds of hyperventilation where you're going, and then you hold, and then you do some push-ups, and then you go back. And the first, I don't know, I'd say 3/4 of the way through, I was high as a kite, like flying high as a kite. And then I crashed. And I didn't just weep. I bawled. You know, like when you do like the ugly face cry. And it was
Yes.
it was awful. I was like, even thinking about it now, like I'm angry that I was even put through that experience. And that's no one's responsibility. Like, we don't know, but it's the reason why, if you already have any high cortisol levels, this is one of the worst things you can do. You are not going, and they talk about, oh, people have these breakthroughs. No, they don't. They have breakdowns.
Breakdown.
And no one's guiding them how to get out of it.
Right. And have a
So
nice
I had some other friends. So Steve and Mary Beth Gangemi had also gone through Wim Hof, and we were all of the same mindset of like, yeah, I like your cold stuff, but do you know what? This other side of it, like for some people, again, none of this stuff is one size fits all. And so for where I was at in my life and where they were at, and Steve's an incredible health coach, chiropractor, naturopath. He's my doctor. We all started kind of going down our little breathwork rabbit holes. And then I knew that Mary Beth had gone through the Oxygen Advantage and Buteyko breathwork systems. And I was hiking with them in Zion, one of the national parks here in the States. And we'd done a really long morning hike. And then we came back to the room. It was really hot. We were all sharing a room. And so we all had a nap. And like, I'm a natural, I've always been a nasal breather. I've been a nose diaphragmatic breather, like big fat belly breather. And after my nap, they were just taking the piss out of me. And Steve was going like, you're such a nose breather. Like, you're such a mouth breather. And I was like, I'm not a mouth breather. And he was like, I could hear you from the other side of the room. And Mary Beth very kindly was like, she's not a mouth breather. And basically what that uncovered for me was, yes, I was a nose breather. Yes, I was a diaphragmatic breather, but I was an over breather. So if you can hear my breathing whilst I'm sleeping, not snoring, you can just hear the breathing from the other side of the room. Like, that's still a dysfunctional breathing pattern. So Mary Beth was training people, doing the same kind of movement snacks, the same kind of mobility, doing A lot of stuff from Original Strength. She's also a Strong First kettlebell instructor. She's MoveNat as well. We've done some parkour stuff together. And I was staying with her and I was like, show me. Show me how you're teaching people. And I knew about this thing called the BOLT score, which stands for your body oxygen level test. And she was saying, so when you do this test, and it's a really simple test, you just close your mouth, you do a normal inhale through your nose, a normal exhale through your nose, and then you pinch your nose. And then what you're doing is counting how many seconds it is until you naturally want to take your next breath, or you feel like a physical sensation. It could be something in your throat, it could be your diaphragm. But when is your brain going like, hey, I want to breathe. Like I'm not cool with this. And it's nothing about pushing through. There's other tests that are kind of for that. So what this does is it tests your chemosensitivity to a buildup of carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is what we exhale, we inhale oxygen, but then there's a gas exchange which releases the oxygen into the cells, the blood, the organs, the cerebral blood flow. And the more CO2 we're happy to have built up in our system, the more oxygen then goes to the blood, the cells, the brains, the organs. So this stuff is like, this is really cool. And Mary Beth was telling me like, oh yeah, like I can change people's BOLT scores, like improve them by like 3 seconds a week, in the first 3 weeks. And I was like, what? And I was working with clients who, had nervous system dysregulation, stiff joints, anxiety, poor sleep, all of these kind of things that they'd normalized of like, well, I'm in my 50s, I'm in my 40s.
Life
And I'm
just
like,
sucks now, right?
yeah. And it's like, I call bullshit on that thinking.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's just, and again, it's like, there's nothing more minimalist and free and autonomous than having a way to self-regulate and control how you breathe. You can do it standing at the checkout. Nobody knows you're doing breath work. You can do it sat on a train or like long plane flights. I'm like, oh, amazing. I've got 12 hours breath work. I'm just going to, and you arrive and feel amazing. So I then decided to do I was very inspired, and Mary Beth gave me some dynamic apnea breath hold sprint drills. And I've done some hard training. I have never in my life been so fried than these 10 minutes. And I was like, this is interesting. So it ticked a lot of boxes for me. It was interesting. It was transformative. It was free. It was minimalist, anytime, anywhere, everywhere, and had huge downstream benefits. So I went off and I did the Advanced Oxygen Advantage certification. I haven't done the Buteyko one, but I've like read extensively and done lots of other stuff. And it's basically, if you can help bring someone back into functional breathing patterns. So when you do this BOLT score thing, 25 is the sweet spot of functional breathing patterns. And just to give you an idea, 85% of elite athletes have dysfunctional breathing patterns. And so the general population, you're talking about maybe 90%. And this can be either mouth breathing or these heavy nasal breathing. And what's really cool is the way to fix it. The drills are so simple. The drills are child's play. They're not easy to do because we breathe over 20,000 times a day. So you have to really pattern interrupt to change that. But what it does as well is you can get such an amazing read on people and where their nervous system at and where their brain's at and how they think and their capacity for recovery, how they sleep, just by observing how they breathe. And also how they breathe, just doing everyday relaxed life. Because there's times when like, okay, I'm lifting heavy shit, or I'm singing, or I'm doing that,
running, right?
Yeah. No, not running. But there are certain things related to the position of your rib cage and your diaphragm, and your intercostal muscles, which are going to dictate like, actually, no, if you do this is going to set you up for success. So when anyone scores poorly on a BOLT score, what I say is, this is a treasure map because you have such incredible untapped potential that you have no idea how good you can feel. So someone who's going through life with a Bolt score of 13 has a very different experience of everyday life than someone who has a Bolt score of 20 or someone who has a Bolt score of 30. Of how much energy you have, how quickly you recover, how much growth hormones you produce, your blood pressure, your metabolism, your brain fog, your cognitive skills of memory and clarity. And so I had a lot of brain fog before. When I was writing my book, I couldn't think of words. I mean, there's no bigger disaster than that when you're trying to write a book. It's like, what's happening? This is really inconvenient. So everything is easier and more optimal downstream of how you breathe. So if in 3 weeks of someone working with me, like they do movement snacks at the beginning, but depending on what their starting point is, if their starting point is a kind of low Bolt score, then the first 3 weeks, their priority is these breathing drills. And how we breathe, even though we're breathing all the time, we're very effective. That's wonderful. I don't want anyone to not be breathing.
Be effective,
And
right?
you're not bad at breathing. You're not breathing wrong. And it's the difference between effective and efficient.
Efficient.
So you and I, someone could run for the bus and they could catch the bus. Awesome. You were effective. But they could also run for the bus and heel strike and put their knee out and be sore the next day and have all these conditions. But they got there, got the job done. A to B, got on the bus. But they're sore the next day. They can't do this thing, da 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 da. And then maybe if the bus was a little bit further away, or you're at the airport and you have to run for the gate because you've been daydreaming. Couldn't possibly relate to that scenario. And then
Never happened, right?
And then you're like, oh shit, I've got a 10-minute jog to get, and you're the person walking on the plane looking very sweaty. But you have that capacity. So it's a movement skill that is the biggest one that's missing from most people who do a kind of functional movement training. And yet it has the capacity to change everything in your movement capacity because it's a reflection of your nervous system. And we're running, it's just on autopilot, and then we can go, shifting into manual drive. So within 3 weeks, the kind of changes people have, and recently a lot of people in their feedback to me have been using the word profound, which is like, that's like, wow, that's really amazing for them. Is they'll say things like, I feel levels of anxiety just shifting away. I sleep through the night. I don't wake up during the night. I don't wake up and pee during the night because our diaphragm and our pelvic floor are directly connected. Their creative thinking has come back. If you have a concussion, you need to sort your breathing out, because how you breathe, if you're an overbreather or a mouth breather, you will have 40% less cerebral blood flow than someone who has functional breathing patterns. So for your brain health, it's a game changer. So again, it's just these like cool little things that have huge results. So in terms of like getting, more bang for your buck in terms of, okay, I just want to move and be happy, and like, okay, how's your breathing? Because you can't own a position or do a position and I've seen people's mobility change. This was freaky as well. And I found this out by accident. So say you're doing mobility drills, like you're on the floor doing some like shin box or rolling and, just warm up mobility stuff. It could be even like gentle QM. And if you're doing it with your mouth closed, you have more oxygen that is feeding your body. So you can do more of the exercise and you'll recover quickly. And that makes you stronger. So I was training a bunch of people in Balboa Park in San Diego on a really sunny, hot day. And the group were quite chatty. There was a lot of talking. And so I had kind of two things I wanted to achieve. Number one, I wanted them to stop mouth breathing, because you also dehydrate quicker. You lose moisture. So when you breathe through your nose, it is filtered, moistened, and you have this huge amount of nasal nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. So the other vasodilator that people know of is Viagra. So this is why nitric oxide is very good for our bodies. It does really great things as a vasodilator. So I wanted them to close their mouths, to stop talking, and to nose breathe, and to not get dehydrated. So I said, just get your water bottle, take a sip of
Sip
water,
and carry it, right?
and you have to keep the water in your mouth and do these drills. And there were two people that day who had very tight hips. And it was like the most incredible before and after. Like they were in a different body when they did the move, holding water in their mouth. Because when you hold water in your mouth, you're nasal breathing. When you're nasal breathing, you trigger the parasympathetic strand branch of your nervous system, which is our rest and digest, as opposed to fight, flight, freeze. And they're both good and they both have a really important role to play. But if you're going through life stuck in a fight, flight, freeze, your body's range of motion is less than when you're at rest and digest. You're saying to your body, like, there's an emergency situation right now.
Get ready. Yep.
Get ready. So there's huge benefits to that. If you're like,
I need to get ready, right?
you need to get ready. You're that person who actually does need to sprint to catch the bus. But you're not going to extend your range of motion. Or if you do, you may break something when you do it. So when you tell your body it's safe and nothing bad's going to happen, you can move better. And it was honestly extraordinary. It was like night and day. And both me and the person, I was like, do that again. And they were like, oh my God, like it was a drill where they were going like shin box. So you've got knees going side to side, and then you push up into your knees and your hips are high. You bring your back leg forward. So then you're in this kind of like kneeling lunge position and then stand up. This person, when they were mouth breathing, couldn't get to the position where they were up on their knees without using their hands for support to push them up, let alone go through any of the other parts of that movement sequence of just like shin box to kneeling, step through, step up, and reverse it smoothly. With water in their mouth, they literally were like a 20-year-old happy mover with no aches and pains. It was extraordinary. And so that's kind of, my breathwork journey. And it's continuing. This morning I actually did a class with David Jackson. He's known as Jacko on Instagram, and he's a ex-British professional rugby player who had concussion. And here's the other reason. So I had a concussion 6-7 years ago, and it put me into PTSD, and I would spend all day on the sofa crying. And when I went outside, unless I was doing something just like, and I feel quite emotional even talking, I'm like, fuck yeah, that was really very challenging time of life. And it's also having that concussion and the PTSD as a result really showed me the difference of moving outside barefoot versus doing the same movement inside with lights and noise. So I was in San Diego and I had this concussion, and I would be like, okay, I'm gonna, like I believe I'm a convert in terms of like movement is good. movement helps us mentally, physically, all those things. And I was doing some heavy lifting at the time, and I would go, and I remember going to the gym thinking like, oh, this will shift my mood, shift my energy. This will do all the good things that it does on paper. And I went and I set up the barbell. I did my warm up, and I'm like, no, just again, a very clear no. And so I put everything away, and I went down to the park. I took my shoes off, walked around on the grass. I was near the water, and there were some railings there, and I just walked on some railings barefoot. And I felt my nervous system come back into regulation. I was aware my breathing was slower. It was calmer. And so I did a lot of kind of deep dives into brain health and cerebral blood flow. And guess what comes up? It's how you breathe. So this morning, so Jacko is this well-known British rugby player who had a really bad concussion. And he went down that, rabbit hole. And believe me, concussion is not fun. and also I have a lot of history of neurodegenerative disease in my family. So I'm very keen on blood flow to my brain, and life feels different when you have functional breathing. You move different. And the other thing a lot of clients say to me at the moment is like, I'm just thinking differently. I say, yep. And I know a lot of people who have a huge amount of anxiety that spend all day doing mindset drills and mindset work. Like they're devoted to mindset and nothing
It's kind of like the
changes.
exact wrong thing, right? You're just torquing yourself up the same way you've been torqued up.
Well, the issue is that there isn't anything inherently wrong with what they're trying to do, but you're just swimming against the tide because you can't overwrite this physiological need. An oxygen deprived brain is an oxygen deprived brain. And you can't think yourself out of an oxygen deprived brain. You can only breathe your way into an oxygen not deprived brain. So I'm into it. It's cool. It's fun. And there's really cool like simulated high altitude training drills. So like what I was doing with Jacko this morning, you can basically get your blood saturation oxygen levels down low. So I live at sea level, but this morning in my training, I went to 10,000 meters. So I was running at 10,000 meters this morning through how I was breathing. It's really cool. Yeah. That's right.
There's
There you
like,
go.
let's close a couple of loops. I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly where, but I know I have it written down. I have a great podcast with Vic, not that I did, but like on a good show, which I want to link to because if people are interested in him, I think it's a good gateway to learn more about him. So I'll put that one in the episode notes. Also, same thing for Mary Beth Gangemi. And if people are interested, like, wait, Julie, tell me more. Where's your website? Where can they find you to learn more about doing breathwork with you?
Yeah. So julieangel.com, there's a menu heading which says work with Julie. And I have a 3-week breathwork course, which is called Revive and Thrive. And it's amazing. I'm so proud of it. And the testimonials are just like, don't believe me, just ask other people. And like go and find them, look up their names, go and message them, talk to them. And for me, one of the biggest things is people don't need to keep suffering. And so many people, there's this kind of silent suffering of pushing through. And also so many people are doing so many of the quote good things, the right things. And they just hit a wall. And for them it's even worse than if they weren't trying to do anything at all. And it'll be like, I'll talk to women and they'll be like, I'm eating clean. I'm doing my mindset work. I have my gratitude journal. I go for 5 walks a day. I'm a member of my community, and I'm doing this. And do you know what? And I feel fat. I'm 40 pounds overweight. My joints ache. I feel shit. I talk shit about myself. My self-esteem and confidence is awful. I get up 3 times in the night to pee. Like, what am I going to be like in 10 years' time? And do you know what? Sheila, who lives across the road from me, she eats pizzas. She doesn't do shit. And she's happy as
She's
anything. No
killing it,
problems
right?
whatsoever. Sheila's got good breathing.
Hmm.
It's such a rough deal. And for so many people, I just say, look, when people tell me what, they'll tell me what's going on. And then, I'll spend like an hour with them on Zoom and I can guess their Bolt score. And then it's like, there's no mystery. There's no mystery why these things aren't working. There's no mystery why you're feeling how you're feeling. And like I say, if you do a Bolt score, which is just, in Buteyko, they call it a control pause. Kelly Starrett and his wife, Juliet Starrett, they brought out a really great book last year called Built to Move. And what's really nice is people who are in this kind of, like they're big voices in the movement fitness world and CrossFit and all those kind of things. They're seeing now, like, what's the number one thing in terms of like, so there's 10 things that they say you need to build. Number 1, breathwork, breathing. You need to return to functional breathing patterns, and they use the Bolt score. So it's like, it's not some niche fringe thing. It's like, and And none of it's new. I mean, they only discovered nitric oxide in the 90s, but other than that, there's peer-reviewed science from the 1840s about this stuff. It's not woo-woo. It's not, it's down to earth. It's just your biochemistry and your respiratory chemistry is really honest. You can't bullshit me around how you're breathing. And the biggest one is I see people and they'll say like, no, Julia, I'm a nose breather. I'm convinced I nose breathe all the time. And it's like, you've not been nose breathing at all whilst you've been listening to me in this conversation. Your lips look like they're closed, but they're not. Unless your lips are sealed closed and you've got this watery saliva in your mouth, you're not nose breathing. And so it's really honest, and I like that. It's really bio-individual. It's very autonomous. It's very minimalist. It's free, and it makes all the rest of your movement and your life and your thinking today and in 5 or 10 years time, like just so much more optimized for happiness and joy. And like, let's get back to like strong to be useful. It's like you have things you need to go and do in the world and share, like. And it's really hard to do that if you're swimming against the tide of overbreathing and dysfunctional breathing patterns. So I have this 3-week course. I love it. And actually, I mean, this podcast probably won't go out within the next 48 hours. But this Thursday, I have a breathwork free webinar. But I do them quite regularly. So if you follow me on social media, you can find those.
Yeah, I'm not going to make 48 hours. Like
I know.
maybe a couple weeks. I mean, often I'm quite fast, but I'm not that fast today.
Well, maybe, but when this comes out in a couple of weeks' time, there'll be a breathwork webinar coming up.
Yeah, probably. My guess would be February 7th, maybe February 15th, but I would let you know. Yeah, I got nothing to add. I got about 19 new questions. Maybe one more fun one. How about sometimes I ask people for books, but you're built the move book, which I call it first date. I have there's a bunch of books over here. I have a problem with books, but I call it the first date. I open it up and then I flip around and I kind of get to know the book, and then I put it away so that when I glance at the spine, I kind of know what's in there. So I've dated built the move.
I have a good book for you. I have an amazing book for you. It's called The Mindful Body by Dr. Ellen Langer. And it's about the power of the mind over the body. So Ellen Langer did a very well-known series of research projects called the counterclockwise study. And she is known in many circles as, quote, the godmother of mindfulness. But contrary to what a lot of people think about mindfulness, her approach, and she's a disruptor. She's I love her. I love her work. She was the first ever female professor to get tenure at Harvard, or it may have been Stanford, one of those Ivy League ones. And it's all about placebo, nocebo, mind, body. Literally, like how long you will take to recover is based on your perception of time. She did the very famous housekeeper study where people didn't think they were doing exercise. And then she showed them like, well, no, every time you put those towels up on the shelf, that's an overhead press. Every time you go down there, that's a squat. And for the people who then took that on board, they lost 6 pounds and gained muscle with doing nothing any differently. And she's replicated that. And counterclockwise was about retro aging and environment for a group of 85-year-old men for, I think it was 2 weeks. And she did this project in the US, South Korea, Germany, and the UK. Same results across the board. So no mirrors. Everyone had to do everything for themselves. So these gentlemen, when they arrived, some of them were like, well, I can't carry my suitcase upstairs. And she's like, not my problem. Take one t-shirt at a time. Maybe it takes 4 days. Sort it out. Like you need to make your own decisions and have more autonomy in your life. All of the entertainment they had available to them was from 40 years younger. They had photos of themselves 40 years younger. She took all their biomarkers of aging, reaction times, cognitive tests, memory, saliva, cortisol at the beginning. And at the time, there actually weren't that many aging biomarker tests. So her and her research group created some. And at the end of 2 weeks, people aged, had retro aged their biomarkers by 15 to 20 years, cross-culturally across all these experiments. So when people walk around going like, oh, I feel really old. oh, I'm going to put my old bones down on this chair. It's like, your body hears everything. Your body hears everything. So her book is extraordinary. And so The Mindful Body by Dr. Ellen Langer is my current fave.
Spell her last name. Langer.
Langer. And her notion of what mindfulness means is to notice, is to simply notice things. If you can't notice it, your mind's not attuned to it.
You're never going to change it. You're never even going to have any opportunity.
And so it's like with breath work, it's like you can't change something you're not aware of. So step one, like if someone's listening going, yeah, okay, Julie, like you sold me on the idea, but what do I do? Number one, start becoming aware of how you're breathing. Like when, where, with whom, how, like it's really, maybe you'll get lucky, but it's really hard to change things you're not aware of. So that's, she and like she says, she has nothing against meditation. Me neither. I don't do it, but I'm noticing things all the time. So that's my book top tip.
Okay, so I didn't ask you for a book and you hit that out of the park. How about if I don't ask you for a podcast episode people should listen to?
Oh my God. What one I've done, or just a general cool one to listen to?
A general cool one, or it could be one of your own. I have no qualms against self-promotion.
I'm going to go self-promotion. I had a conversation with an amazing movement coach, and she does called Julie Tom, THOMM, and she's, quote, a trauma-informed movement coach. And I've done some really cool podcasts, but the conversation with Julie, like a friend of mine who helps do the notes for the podcasts, another friend who helps edit them sometimes, other people who listen to them, they all came back and were just like, when this episode is the best. And we could have talked for like 3 hours. And I have some, I've had some amazing conversations. So I really like that. I listen to a whole range of podcasts. Yeah.
Let's see. That's 2 questions not asked and hit out of the park. How about if you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, what would you put on it?
Have fun with it. That's it. I wouldn't say what.
That's
just have fun with it.
Okay. All right. I'm watching our time tick by. Not the first time we've had a great conversation, in my opinion, but the second. I was going to say the first time on the show. Second time we've recorded it. I'm going to have my homework cut out for me, making episode notes for this thing. But I will just say, and of course, the final question, 3 words to describe your practice.
3 words that describe my practice are emotional, interesting, and joyful. Because movement is emotional, and most people talk about, muscles and tendons and range of motion and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, of course, but moving's really emotional and it's all connected. And whether those are emotions about how you feel about showing up to your movement, the emotions you experience in the movement, how you feel afterwards, all of those things, those emotions are the things that create the thoughts that drive your actions of whether you are or aren't going to move. So, and most people, when I introduce them or like I say this thing about movement is emotional, it seems to be like a whole new thing for them. And it's like, this should be talked about, whether it's the emotion of, push through survivor warrior type emotions, or whether it's like, I find fear really exciting, or I find fear terrifying and I don't like it, or excitement, joy, fear, thrills, sadness. Like sometimes you can move. I remember like trying to do some like back squats and it just made me cry. I'm like, I hate back squats. I have a really shitty deep squat. I hate and people would be like, oh, you shouldn't use the word hate, Julie. I'll use the word whatever I want. So And then interesting, like, again, so many movement systems have so much value. My preference is for ones that I find interesting. I could go to a CrossFit gym. I just find it boring. It's not interesting to me. And I think when you've done something like parkour, which is interesting, emotional, connects you to your environment, it connects you to, like, who am I in the moment? It's, like, okay, we have the imaginative vision of reinterpreting the environment, but the most interesting part is the mirror. Who am I in this moment right now, today? Not like I should, well, I used to be able to, or any of those dialogues, but just who am I right now? How can I show up? Like, can I do it? Do I want to do it? Know thyself. And joyful. I just feel like, and I find joy in challenge. Joyful doesn't always have to mean easy. But I find joy across a range of curiosities of challenge, ease, adaptability, creativity, and playfulness. That all kind of comes under the umbrella of joy.
Terrific, as I've started saying all the time. Yeah, the thing about when somebody says something profound, what do you say after that? That was awesome. That's my answer to that. Was profound. Thank you for unpacking all that. Thank you for being game to go on the ride. And I look forward to seeing what you do next. I think that was a blast.
Oh, me
Thanks
too.
so
Who
much.
knows? That's the thing. I never know. But thank you so much, Craig. And time flies when we have our conversations, and I can't believe it's like
52 minutes,
I'm like,
right?
that was just the warm up.
Fortunately, the internet has lots of space.
Yeah. Tell my iCloud that.